Well, welcome to Krayden's Right with David Krayden. Hope you're enjoying this last week of August. Not the last week of summer, as some people think. I'm a real stickler for dates. And the summer is not over on Labor Day. It's over on September 20th. So let's keep on boogieing all the rest of the summer. Boogieing, it's a 70s word. It doesn't feel like we're living through the 1970s. And before we get to the weekly roundup, I just want to mention, read my column today. It's about the coming digital ID, which Justin Trudeau is surely to God pressing upon us. And I think this is a very dangerous concept, very dangerous indeed, because what starts with government services is surely going to end with just about everything, to the toilet paper you use to, you know what, in the bathroom. And as a friend of mine said to me the other day, they're going to follow you everywhere. They're going to know how much scotch you drink. They're going to know how much meat you eat. They're going to know if you're doing things the government way. And that's what this is all about, control. And it started with the pandemic, and it's continuing. They got their taste for authoritarian control through the COVID-19 pandemic. They got their taste for digital ID through the QR codes. And the provinces are following through. The Ontario government is following through on this. And unfortunately, a lot of people think this is convenient. Slavery is not convenient. It might be easy in some ways to relinquish your rights to authorities, to big business, to big government, but it's ultimately pretty miserable. If you ask people who have been in servitude, it's pretty miserable. So read that column today. I wrote a great one yesterday on masking, and I got a letter to the Western Standard today from somebody who said this is a right-wing backlash, that we should all be still masking. And I mean, these people are insane, absolutely insane. Masking does absolutely nothing to prevent you from getting the COVID-19 virus. Anthony Fauci, the kingpin, pandemic kingpin czar in the States, showed this. There's absolutely nothing about this that's going to prevent you from getting this. And it's absolutely ridiculous to think you can walk around with a mask on and you're not going to breathe in anything but carbon dioxide. And this is why this is absolutely insane. So I will proceed now to the weekly roundup. And this is, I'll get to the other columns next week in depth, but I think we did a lot of exciting columns this week. And if you didn't have a chance to read them, they're still up online at the Western Standard. I encourage you to do that. I really do encourage you to do that, because there's so much going on right now that it's easy to miss. And it's summertime, and even though the House of Commons is not sitting, this is when Justin Trudeau and his cabinet are pushing through a lot of very dangerous things. And the World Economic Forum and the globalists are pushing through a lot of dangerous legislation. So let's talk about that. Number one, Trudeau is, I said, at the same time, he's refusing to sell Germany our liquid natural gas. He's belching out these green energy fantasies. So what's happening this week? It's possibly one of the most perverse trade deals in history. Certainly one of the worst in history. Canada is going to buy Germany's cars, Volkswagen and Mercedes electric cars. And no, they're not being made in Canada. So there's no Canadian jobs here. We're buying German-made cars from Germany, shipping them overseas to Canada. Germany came to Canada begging us for our natural gas because they're worried about not having enough energy for the winter. They're worried about the oil and natural gas drying up from Russia, because obviously the Russia-Ukraine war continues. Russia is angry at NATO. Germany was a founding member of NATO. Germany continues to be an energetic member of NATO. a very viable member of NATO. And Germany's worried they're going to face serious repercussions from Russia. So they're asking Canada for their support. Trudeau says no. There's not a good business case for selling natural gas to Germany. Actually, there's $1 billion worth of business case for doing that. And so this is one of the worst trade deals in history. We're buying German cars and we're not selling natural gas back to Germany. Instead, Trudeau's considering hydrogen. What an incredible atrocity. Hydrogen is something Germany's always had. In fact, if you go back to the Hindenburg, Germany had hydrogen to fill their Zeppelins with. They didn't have helium. they were looking for helium to fill their Zeppelins with, so they had to use hydrogen, which was, of course, a highly volatile gas. So there's irony upon irony. The thing about this is, of course, Trudeau's going on about green energy, and electric cars are really not green. They rely upon fossil fuels to produce the electricity to power them. Where do you think the electricity is coming from? You plug them in. Where is the power coming from? Some magic source? Well, usually it's coming from coal-fired power plants. It's not coming from some magic source. And this is where people are saying, wow, I plug it in and magically the car comes alive and I can drive down the road. I can go from Ottawa to Toronto and back. I can go to work and back every day, and I don't have to use fossil fuels. Absolute nonsense. You do have to use fossil fuels. And this is what's happening with this. And people are just fooling themselves into believing it doesn't use fossil fuels. In fact, if you're driving to work and back every day, it takes about the same amount of power necessary to use your air conditioner every day during summer, or to use 10 washing machines. So yes, there's going to be a cost to transform to electric cars. And there's all kinds of other issues involved too. Batteries, we're running out of batteries around the world. And the materials necessary to make those batteries, we are using child labor to extract those materials from the earth. So there's ethical problems as well. Are the green energy nuts worried about that? They certainly haven't indicated any issues about that. So these are green energy fantasies. I call them that. And Trudeau's once again going off and on that, losing Canadian jobs and not selling Canadian resources in the process. So this is another insane idea. And I ask in this column, is there anybody in the Liberal caucus or cabinet with the brains or the balls to call them out on this? It's time for Trudeau to go. It's time for Trudeau to resign. And we need somebody with the brains to get in there. If you look at this slide here, Ford is already laying off 3,000. In fact, not laying off. This is inaccurate. It's firing. These jobs are not coming back. It's firing at least 3,000, possibly up to 8,000 jobs, most of them in Canada. So this is what the Green New Deal looks like for Canada. It means fewer people working on the auto assembly lines, fewer people working in the auto sector. They're saying these are all white-collar jobs. I'll bet. Yeah. So these are very difficult times ahead here. Another great story here about how the Arrive Can app is destroying cross-border commerce. And can you think of a good reason that we're keeping this thing alive? I mean, we've got a transport minister who can't come up with a coherent sentence to justify this, or a prime minister who can possibly explain why the Arrive Can app is necessary. The COVID-19 virus is basically dead. We heard this from the Centers for Disease, the CDC, a couple of weeks ago, said this, that the COVID-19 pandemic is over, and we should be treating the unvaccinated like the vaccinated now. So why are we continuing to treat people coming across the border like the pariahs? Why are we continuing to demand this incredible invasive app? And we are literally putting senior citizens through torture as they come across the border, fining them thousands of dollars if they can't provide the information we're demanding, making their lives hell, making the end of their trips like hell. And why are we doing this? For ideological reasons and nothing else. This has got nothing to do with public health. This is something we have to understand. None of this has got anything to do with public health and safety. It's got everything to do with the COVID-19 religion that Justin Trudeau, that Joe Biden, and that the health regime, the Gestapo that are running the show, subscribe to. It is a religion. The masking, the vaccines, these are all talismans that are part of this religion. And you have to have these talismans with you to be accepted as part of this religion. So when you enter the airport, put your mask on, make sure you've been vaxxed, make sure you've got your ArriveCan app, or else you're not coming back to Canada. I talked to a secretary at a congresswoman's office the other day. In fact, the congresswoman was Representative Elise Stefanik, and I'm still trying to interview Representative Stefanik because she is outraged over the fact that this ArriveCan is still going. Is still around because it's making visits from Americans to Canada virtually impossible, because most of them don't even know this thing exists. They come to the border and they're saying, have you got your ArriveCan app? Have I got my what? They're saying. And believe me, Americans are coming across the border in huge numbers or trying to come across the border in huge numbers because the dollar is very high right now as compared to the Canadian dollars. It's 30%. And because Canadian prices are very good as compared to American prices, because our inflation rate is lower than the American inflation rate. So we have a chance right now to be making a killing in terms of cross-border shopping. And lots of stores and businesses are closing because Americans can't come across the border as they traditionally have to buy consumer products and materials. All because Trudeau is stopping them at the border with bureaucratic madness. And this simply has to stop. But it won't. Because you know what? It might turn out to be a second passport and part of Trudeau's digital ID. And if that happens, we're looking at catastrophic results. We're looking at border stoppage in mass numbers. And that is something that is going to lead to ultimate disaster. If you think things are bad now, we are headed for a recession. The United States is already in a recession. Joe Biden won't admit that, but it is technically already there. And Canada is headed towards that. The housing market is bottoming out. The dollar is collapsing. Inflation is continuing to rise. We're looking at gas prices, although receding right now, are going to start climbing again in September. And the worst is yet to come. And the auto industry, as we've just discussed, is on the verge of collapse. And green energy is going to mean the fossil fuel industry is going to collapse as well. And believe me, there's no silver lining with green energy, because all of the green energy market has been captured already by China. We're only helping China with green energy. So if we can proceed to our last story here. Trudeau has really gone his own way on two fronts here. And if we could stay on this slide, Trudeau has gone his own way on two fronts. And that is on COVID, he's continuing to pretend we are in a crisis. He's continuing to govern with these emergency powers. He's continuing to ignore that the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC in the United States, is backing away from the COVID-19 hysteria. Justin Trudeau wants his emergency powers. Justin Trudeau likes his pandemic. Justin Trudeau likes the hysteria. The health Gestapo in Canada continues to say the pandemic's not over. Another wave is coming. It's not going to stop. Keep those masks on. Keep getting the booster shots. Keep getting booster shots every 9 months for the rest of your life. This is insanity. And who's benefiting from that kind of talk? Big pharmaceuticals. They're making billions of dollars off of these vaccines, and they'll continue to make billions of dollars as long as we keep getting these shots for the rest of our lives. And they are the only people who are benefiting from this. The only people benefiting from this. And that's why it's time to say no to Big Pharma, and it's time to say no to Justin Trudeau. Because there's no sense to this policy. There's no sense to anything that's going on with Justin Trudeau's mentality. And he's become an isolationist in terms of COVID. He's also become an isolation with carbon taxes, because as crazy as President Joe Biden is, he's decided to use the carrot, not the stick, with his green energy plan. He's not going to impose carbon taxes because he knows it doesn't make a bit of difference. He's decided to go the other crazy route, which is electric cars, which the United States is not ready to transition to, but he's not going to go the crazy carbon tax route. Justin Trudeau is going both routes, and both routes are slated for catastrophe. But at least Joe Biden is only going on one road to catastrophe. So in both cases, Justin Trudeau is following an isolationist path, and it's really quite dangerous. And I think this is something we really need to consider. So that's the weekly wrap up this week, folks. I encourage you to read the articles in the Western Standard. I'm writing every day right now because I think we need to stay aware of what's happening. And I encourage you to read the Western Standard. And I'll tell you why. Get a subscription. It's www.westernstandard.news. Go on and get a subscription, because this is an online source of media news that you won't find everywhere else. Because the Western Standard does not accept any government money. Most of the media today is getting subsidized by the Trudeau government. And guess what? When you're subsidized by Trudeau, you tend to accept what Trudeau is saying. You tend to repeat the government talking points. When you don't accept government money, you're free to print the truth. You're free to print as you feel free to write. And that's the policy at the Western Standard. Never to accept government subsidies, never to accept liberal government money. And thank God, when we have a different government, that policy is going to change. And the next Conservative Prime Minister has pledged not to subsidize the media and to privatize the CBC, because we do not need a state broadcaster. It's bad for democracy. And quite frankly, there's no rationale for having a state broadcaster when there is so much media available, so much media broadcasting Canadian content these days. There's no rationale for it, no justification at all. So I would encourage you to do that. And also, please, please, please have a look at my Krayden's Right with David Krayden YouTube channel, because I need your support. We've got the name now. We've got over 200 subscribers, but we need to monetize. We need to monetize. We need over 1,000 followers to do that. And I know we can do that. because I want to stay on the air. I want to be on the air all the time, 7 days a week, 365 days a week, talking about the things that are important to you, talking about the things that Canadians need to know about, and you're not going to hear on the mainstream media, and even you're not going to hear on other YouTube channels, because the news never runs out. But I'll tell you, the media does run out on the news. They run out on the news they don't want you to hear. And the mainstream media is not on your side. It's on the side of those big interests. It's on the side of the big government. It's on the side of those who don't want you to know what's really happening. And I'll tell you, I want you to know what's really happening. And I'm here every day to tell you what's going on in your world. And this is my world, and I want you to be a part of it. So for Krayden's Right with David Krayden, enjoy the rest of the summer as we celebrate our freedom and keep on fighting. God bless you today.